Okay, I'm gonna hit go live, so we will see, but it's not live yet.
Mine says it is, so.
Oh, good.
I think we're good.
Yay! Okay.
So I should
turn my volume down. Sweet. Okay, so we are live, everyone. I hope that you can hear us okay.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Laura. Welcome, everybody. It's Laura Craig.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited about this.
We are too. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, can you all leave us some
to ramble on about astrology? I happily accept.
We're so glad you do. Can somebody like leave us a comment and just make sure, I just want to make sure that we are up and running. I did see a heart, but like the hearts and the comments are important so that I just know if we are actually coming in strong. Yay. Okay, we've got some comments. Hello. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Amy. Hi, Jenny.
Hey, guys. I can't see who's here, but I know those names. Hello, hello.
Exactly. Okay, thank you all so much. So we're gonna get started and we're gonna go like 8 to about 8:30-ish. Laura and I tend to get winded together, so we may go a little beyond that. Stay with us if you can. And what I wanna start with, Laura, is kind of a really giant question, and I'm sorry, but I wanna start with, you know, what are kind of the big themes that are online for just, we'll say for the US, you know, this year? What are the things and the themes that we really should be looking out for in our personal life and our business life and, you know, relationships?
That is a big question. So I'm going to start super big and then kind of probably focus down in. But it takes a minute of just disclaiming about last year before we get into this year. So you all may recall last year was a doozy. And we talked about in our last live, I think, I can't remember what month it was, but just this idea that all about last year was about like breaking down systems and structures, right? And clearly that happened or is still happening, but it was all about just dismantling the ways we set up our lives, our society, and then analyzing, you know, what's no longer working. It was as if things had become old and calcified and no longer worked or no longer doing what they were supposed to do, right? And that all became painfully obvious with the pandemic and with the social justice issues and all of the things that sort of blew up, right? So now we enter 2021, and it also is worth mentioning that, you know, we're talking about the calendar year. And so the astrological years are measured slightly differently. Oh, here's my buddy. Let's hope he can keep it together while
hey, buddy.
I'm on the phone. Nevertheless, at the end of December on the solstice, we had an astronomical event, a rare astronomical event that was also a rare astrological event called the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. And you may have seen it in the sky. It was pretty hyped, just in general. Yeah. And it was this joining in the sky of these two big outer planets that only happens every 20 years. And that's fascinating in and of itself, just from an astronomical point of view, but from an astrological point of view, it's a reset button for the next 20 years starting over, right? And so one thing it's important to remember about astrology is that we are looking at cycles of the planets. We're looking at we're looking at history and the trends that are reflected in the culture in terms of cycles. And that can be as small as the lunar cycle that just goes every 28 days, or as long as these yearly or decades long cycles that are the outer planets, which would be Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus and Neptune and Pluto. So we had this big conjunction in December, and that was sort of a reset button on ushering us into this age of, not the age of Aquarius, because you may see that going around, and I feel like that is misleading and inaccurate. But this year has a lot to say about Aquarius and what that means for people and for individuals. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the sign of Aquarius means. But last year, the theme was Capricorn, the sign that preceded it, which all of the action was happening in. And Capricorn is about breaking down those structures and tradition.
Okay.
The sign after that is Aquarius, which is about liberation. It's about revolution. It's about humanitarianism. So really the themes that we're looking at, big picture wise, are, okay, so we just dismantled all this stuff. And now we have an opportunity to rewrite the script, to dream, to define our ideals, which is an Aquarian term, and to create probably, I think of the Declaration of Independence, which was written under a lot of Aquarian energy, as
Wow.
as really depicting a lot of these themes, right? This life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, you know, and we the people, and all sorts of things like that. This is a chance to try to fulfill some of those ideals that we set down a few hundred years ago, almost. So that sounds like a big thing. That sounds very lofty, and it is. But it comes with this idea that, you know, it's time to push against the norms a little bit. It's time to embrace change. It's time to embrace an attitude that questions, you know, and of course that can have its negative qualities and aspects too, but it ultimately feels like this year is not going to be necessarily easier than last year. And it's not really on me to predict that, or even to be able to define what easier is. On the other hand, it doesn't feel as oppressive, doesn't feel as heavy. It feels just more electric. It feels more excited. It feels more active. It feels more restless.
Okay.
Take a break. Take a breath.
Yeah. I'm just, you know, like, leave it in the comments if you've felt that so far, because I would say that I've felt that. Like, I've used, you know, I feel like I'm walking through sand. Like, things have just been very heavy. Where, yeah, I mean, that word is really a great word. Whereas now there's still some of that lingering, but there's a lot more, like, things are happening, and it doesn't mean everything is for me necessarily, right? But like, there's a lot more action going on.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we can look for is power structures and who holds power and our relationship to that, and how we distribute power. And something about the sign of Aquarius always, to me, speaks to the people. It speaks to this idea that we all have this, we are all equal in some sense. And it's a very democratic idea, you know, and that feels like we will be grappling with a lot of that story this year, especially in this country, as things become more grassroots, maybe more localized, more internet and online based, you know, and all of the kind of Pandora's box of that. But that is, to me, the difference between last year and this year, where last year it was sort of like this huge shock to the system, where we all just became confined all of a sudden and confronted all of a sudden. And this year, no, it's like we can still be confronted, but it's entering a little bit, we have a little bit more space to think and move and to try to, like, evolve the stuff that we started last year. And honestly, as I said, stuff we started hundreds of years ago. This is a cycle that has come back around for a review. That is a 280-year cycle that is connected to the planet Pluto, which little old Pluto way far out, you wouldn't think would mean anything. But I assure you it does. So, and that's a bit of a tangent too, but just know that, you know, when I'm talking about astrology, I work with people's individual astrology, but it's always part of a bigger picture, and it's always moving, and there are always dynamics and cycles play.
So we have so this is kind of one of the bigger themes then, right? This Aquarian kind of liberation and, you know, revolution, and how does that, of course, you know, I'm not presenting you with anybody's specific birth chart, but like, how does that show up in, again, kind of like a personal sense, like a wellness sense, or does it, you know, does it, are there kind of themes with that that people could be just on the lookout for, you know, not necessarily expecting, but just looking out for?
Yeah. So it's helpful to me to think of the individual person as a microcosm of the macrocosm. So just as the United States is experiencing its own astrological influences, so are we individuals. And what that means is that we all have somewhere in our birth charts the 12 signs of the zodiac, the planets, and the sun and the moon, which means that at some place in your life, the sign of Aquarius has meaning and defines a certain area of life. It's in some part of your psyche or some part of your experience, there is an Aquarian side to you that seeks, again, non-conformity, that questions authority, that is humanitarian minded and believes very much in everyone's right to be themselves. So archetypally, Aquarius corresponds to the rebel, the truth teller, the exile. You know, these are themes that, again, have to do with fitting in versus standing out and your place within the tribe. Okay, so I guess what I would say in a general sense is wherever Aquarius is in your chart, which is easy enough to find if you have a birth chart, it's going to have a lot of action this year. It's going to get pinged a lot. It's going to get activated a lot as these planets, as many of them move through, beginning now and especially culminating actually next month in February. That's going to be kind of the peak of that.
Okay.
But it's going to be ongoing throughout the year. And it may bring up, again, that feeling of restlessness. It may bring up a feeling of, you know, is this authentic to me anymore? Is this something that I am attached to, but that no longer serves, right? And is it time to let go of it? That could be a relationship, that could be a job, that could be any number of things, your house. It could be—
What you're talking about. I'm afraid I don't relate to that.
Yeah, and it's asking for us to embrace our eccentricity, you know, embrace our weirdness a little bit, you know. For instance, I'll give you an example. Aquarius in my chart corresponds to career and to my beliefs and I guess my philosophy of life. And here I am, I'm an astrologer, which kind of a niche, little bit eccentric, little bit weird, you know, type of thing to do. But that's just for me, and that could be different for other people. So I would be saying, you know, this is a real opportunity to get in touch with what does authenticity mean to you? What are you willing to keep and embrace, even at the expense of close relationships or being misunderstood or being exiled or being judged? That's what Aquarius asks for. It asks for us to challenge norms. And it asks for us to do what we feel is true to ourselves. It's a very individualist, even though it believes in everyone as a whole. It really, it's, you know, it doesn't want to be told what to do. It doesn't want to be labeled.
Wow. I'm actually writing that in comments because I love your journal. You always come up with the best like journal prompts. You do. You're really good at it.
Well, I mean, I like astrology because, you know, some people use it as a predictive tool, but I actually like that it tells us what questions to be asking. You know,
Yeah.
and that leaves it open-ended, and that leaves it a little bit more accessible, I think, to all of our individual experiences and situations and worldviews. You know, because what it means to me might be different than what it means to you, but ultimately it does have that kernel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So meaning that like the point of it is really to keep diving more inward and like really chew on it. And
it's always all of these things that are happening. Once you become aware of them, if you choose to become aware of them, or if you choose to track them either yourself or through somebody like me, they're opportunities. You know, they're not necessarily threatening prophecies. There's like, okay, well, here I have a chance to really examine some of these beliefs about myself, for instance. So
yes.
let me look at that. Let me see where I'm compromising myself. In this case of Aquarius, for instance, you know, where am I being unabashedly true to myself, even if it makes me an outcast, right? And how can I have sympathy for the exile in everybody? Because, right, we all have it somewhere, and we have all at some point felt like we don't fit in, or like we're looking for our people or looking for our tribe. You know, and some of us more than others, but it's a thing that is universal to a degree. And so that's when I say asking these questions, it's really like interrogating yourself and seeing kind of what that brings up. And then by opportunity, I just mean, all right, well, is this my year? Is this my year to just let my freak flag fly, or whatever it is? You know,
right.
Maybe it is.
Yeah. That's really beautiful. Any other themes kind of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So on the zodiac wheel, because it's a wheel, inevitably there will be signs opposing other signs and making these sort of right angles to each other. And anytime that happens, that causes a tension, that causes a polarity.
Okay.
It so happens one of the signs that does that to Aquarius is the sign of Taurus. So if you have a heavily Taurus chart, and even if you don't, Taurus is somewhere in there, it's a very different energy. That is about grounded earthly principles, security, safety, food, shelter, basic needs, getting our, speaking to our senses, our animal nature, right? So things that have to do with Taurus are these like Maslow's hierarchy of needs kinds of things.
Yeah.
And they too are getting challenged, right? Those are getting shaken up. So whether that's finances, our money, whether that's our whatever feels stable and long term, the things that ground us down into our earthly selves, our earthly lives, they too are getting shaken up this year and actually next as well. And that can feel uncomfortable, right? Because in Aquarius, that's one thing. It's like that's kind of what that vibe is. Taurus doesn't really like to be disrupted, and Taurus is being disrupted, and Taurus is being challenged, you know. And so this is a kind of a maybe a doubling down of what I was just talking about previously, but in a whole other area of the sky, therefore of the culture, therefore of the individual life. So again, it's like, this is really, if last year was the dismantling, then this year is really the challenging. And we're just really questioning a lot of things, which is healthy and that's good. It can also send us into hysteria or paranoia if we're not careful. We don't want that. We don't want conspiracy. No, we just want to try to have an open mind. We want to try to really get clear on what our values are. What are we fighting for? What are we believe in? What are we living for?
Yeah, writing that down too.
Yeah, and so again, it's big picture stuff, but that is what I'm seeing and hearing from folks that do this. No, not, it's not just my own original thoughts. Like this is just kind of the overall feel of some of these things.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to break for a second and just say, if anybody has a question or wants Laura to elaborate on anything, write it in the comments. I think I'm, for the most part, getting them. There's not too much of a lag. So put that in there. And then, you know, another question that I had, and I think probably you still have some other themes, I think, that you want to share, but is when somebody's coming to you, you know, and do you have a tendency to like already know what kind of their when somebody gives you like a birthday, right? I'm sure that like, do you kind of already have a sense, or do you have to do like a lot of research? What's kind of that process like?
That's a good question. Are you asking just sort of what my process is for working with people, or open the chart and then?
Yeah.
I can tell a lot from just looking at it, a cursory glance. You know, we could have a nice, healthy discussion about that.
Mm-hmm.
But then I do go further in that I go pretty deep into birth charts, you know, because to me, it's interesting to know, you know, these sorts of like psychological interpretations of the planets. And but I find that the way my brain operates, it's like there's usually a story or a narrative that can be found when we integrate the whole picture. And that story has a resonance to maybe a historical person, or a fictional character, or maybe a myth, or maybe a fairy tale, or something in the collective unconscious that we can pull down, apply to the life, and then give even more meaning to, or even give us like a framework to live to kind of work with. Yeah, so that stuff does require research. You know, I'm always kind of learning new things, which I find really cool and fun that I didn't know before. But and every now and then it requires researching like some certain thing about astrology that I didn't know before. I'm always learning more. I'm always adding to the toolkit, and it's not something that you ever stop learning about, really. But it does tend to be more of like that other kind of stuff that I go down rabbit holes and end up tying it back into the birth chart eventually. And it seems to resonate with people. I mean, it never fails to amaze me just how many of these little threads we can pull at and get to these amazing life stories and experiences and archetypes and all the stuff that you're born with, that you're living out.
Why is that important to look at? Like, what do you think that does to enhance somebody's existence?
Yeah, I know that for me, it gave me a sense of being a part of a much bigger web, a much bigger picture. It gave me perspective on my life. It confirmed things about myself that maybe I would have otherwise questioned. And it's very validating.
Yeah.
It's very validating. And ideally, not only is it validating, but it inspires confidence in yourself, you know, because you can see sort of the perfection of it all, you know. And I don't mean that people are perfect. I mean that like we all have these polarities, these contradictions, these challenges, these gifts, these unique roadmaps to our lives. And if you can see that and have that validated back to you or reflected back to you, it's incredibly affirming, life affirming. And it can feel like, okay, now I understand why I always felt that way about that thing, or I've always acted that way. I've always responded to this experience in this way. So it inspires clarity, confidence, and a sense of there being meaning to life, not just sort of a random existence where you're born and then you die and that's it, you know?
Yeah.
And for me, that was what was appealing, and always still is.
Have you noticed that since 2020, that there's been more interest in really understanding the meaning of life, and that astrology kind of has maybe had an uptick. Like, is this something that maybe a lot of us are more interested in now? Maybe, of course, maybe we're ready. Okay,
Yeah.
we can talk about that. But I'm just curious.
I don't know, but it would make sense, wouldn't it, if it was trending, because last year forced a lot of us to go inward, a lot of us to ask hard questions about ourselves, or to confront like harsh realities, and to go seeking. And some people might seek in one area, but others might seek astrology or spiritual practice, or life coach, or whatever it is, holistic approaches to healing. It would make sense. And I think also, it's becoming less stigmatized. It's becoming more accepted. I think most people are, maybe not most, but at least in my world and my feed, my bubble, it's people are generally aware. Maybe they don't know a lot about astrology, but they know that it's a thing, and that people are doing it. And so it's entering the lexicon in a way that I think is kind of interesting to watch. But yeah, it's possible that last year had something to do with it. It's also possible that it's all just coinciding together. Like, as we all sort of awaken to whatever it is we're awakening to, and asking these questions and challenging norms again, of what it means to seek a spiritual path, or to any kind of self-study.
Yeah.
And we have the tools now. I mean, it's all, you can just easily Google this stuff too, or buy a book or whatever. I mean, it's accessible.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm going to get personal for a minute, but do you ask such incredible questions of your audience and your growing tribe, and your clients. Do you find that you ask those same questions of yourself, and that self-study is adequate and possible, or do you find that you need people to support you too?
Yes to both of those things. I am continually studying my own chart. I'm continually interacting with it, checking in with it, asking hard questions to it. But because I'm me, and sometimes it's hard to see out of your own self, I have just a really good group of folks in my life, not necessarily professionals, but just good friends and people that kind of speak a similar language to me and hold similar beliefs, that I would not be who I am without them, and their support and their guidance, and just their ability to just see me when I need to be seen, and validate or reflect back whatever it is that needs reflecting back. So I definitely seek outside of myself for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I mean, I'm always aware of what's going through the old chart at any given time,
I love that. I love that. And then what about, I'm launching this new series of going inward, right? Mm-hmm. And going inward is something, of course, I've been doing with my clients for a while. And interestingly, your readings with, you and I kind of stumbled upon this, that your readings with all of the juiciness to them, then when they bring this to the session, wow, like our framework goes from, 90 to like just 250. Like it's incredible. What are those themes for yourself really that you've been going inward with lately?
Mm-hmm. Well, the ways that I have been going inward lately, it's funny because I'm an incredibly inward person to begin with. I mean, it doesn't get much more inward than me. But I'm introverted and I'm introspective, and I just kind of dig this stuff anyway. So I'm sort of always pondering something in my mind at all times. This year for me has been about creativity and productivity. It's been about, again, last year it was about, do I have something to say? Because there was so much going on, and I certainly have opinions about the world and about people in the world. the way it's all going. But on the other hand, you know, I was getting a strong message too of like, we have to be very conscious if we are going to say something on any kind of a platform. And I don't have a huge one, but I, you know, as small as mine is, out it goes into the world. So I better be pretty sure about what I have to say. And so there was a hesitancy at first to speak up or to just even talk about this type of stuff. And then I found that it was actually very fulfilling to be able to process a lot of my observations astrologically through my writing. That I'm mostly talking about my blog and my Instagram account, which is Skylore Astrology. And turns out I had a lot to say. But
yes, you do.
In the interest of not, you know, centering myself or taking away or from anybody else's voice, it was more about me kind of working through my thoughts on these things and just hoping that they resonated to other people. And it seems like they do. And it has been really amazing as an exercise, as a practice, to use writing as this tool for going inward, but also then having something to share from it too, because it's important to me, for whatever reason, it was important to me not to just journal it for my own thoughts, but to actually share it with people.
Yeah.
And that's not something I would have been comfortable doing
and you
before. So
you had to kind of push yourself off the ledge with that, right? I mean, I remember we did.
We're a big part of being like, you know what, you know, you can still be you. You can still maintain your sense of who you think you are and be an astrologer and write these things, and like, you can do this. And so you were one of those voices I was referring to a minute ago. It's like, oh, okay, that's really helpful, you know, to hear that and to have people believe in you. So
yeah. Oh, here's a question. I'm sorry, I thought I missed some. Jenny was saying, I've always been told it's equally as important to know where the moon is at one's birth, not just the sun. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
So when we're looking at a birth chart, let me back up. When you look up your horoscope in a magazine, for instance, or online, you're reading for your quote sun sign. So the month of your birth determines what's called your sun sign. But what you will quickly see if you ever look at your own birth chart is that there's more to than just the sun to a person's birth chart. We're looking at the moon and all the other planets in the solar system as well. But the sun and the moon are hugely important for diving into the life and the interpretation of the life and the interpretation of the personality, kind of before we get into the other stuff. The other stuff is very important too. But the sun, in a brief word, sums up what we're here to do. Our whole life centers around fulfilling the needs and desires of the sign that your sun is in. So it's external. Whereas the moon is internal, and the moon means a lot of things, but it generally speaks to our emotional nature. It speaks to our instinctive nature. It speaks to the things that nourish us and that feed us, and the ways that we mother ourselves, because it has a sort of a mother archetype. And it's responsive and reactive. So your moon sign is where the moon was, whatever zodiac sign the moon was in, which is easily found out. And we add that as another layer, another piece of this very intricate puzzle. But it can tell you a little bit more about, like, okay, well, I've always been told I was a Scorpio, but I just don't know. And then some people respond more to learning about their moon sign, or just at least kind of like expands on your sun sign in a way that's usually really resonant and helpful to know. So the moon sign is how you feel your way through life.
Huh. Interesting. Well, again, I think every person who relates to being female knows what that's like too. Emotions and feelings throughout life, right?
Yeah, but I mean, men have moon signs, right? So
Yeah.
that is just something to keep in mind. Like we all have these
Yeah.
ingredients in our soup.
Yes. Yeah, and how we're displaying them. Jen has one. How can we best bridge astrology with our intentions, goal setting, and/or coaching work with Sara?
Hmm. Well, that may be more your question to answer than mine, but I
I'll
guess,
try to.
yeah. Do you want to take a stab at that, or would you like me to start
You
off?
go first because I think a way that I can like expand on that question for you is, like how do you take your interpretation or your reading and then put it into some intentions and some goals?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the like not satisfactory answer is like it's kind of individual to each person. Like so it sort of depends. It's not a one size fits all prescription. And
Yeah.
I'm careful not to tell people like what to do next. Though we do talk about things like, hey, if your chart is like real big in the moon, like this is a very lunar chart, and you're not tracking your lunar cycle, or you're not like just literally going and looking at the moon or getting to know the moon symbols, things like that, maybe we want to start doing that, right? Because I do have this like
Yeah.
mysticism piece that comes into it where it's like each chart will have planets that kind of speak for it, and that are really calling the shots and that carry a lot of weight. We want to almost establish relationships with those energies, and each of them is different, but we determine like what that actually looks like in the life. So,
Yeah.
but it could also be like, this chart says that like you have a gift for language. So like, we could be talking about journaling. We could be talking about just speaking into your phone whenever like, the thoughts arise. We could be talking about like a path towards teaching or writing or, I don't know, starting a YouTube account, something like that, so that we're in our linguistic potential. And also it could be something like, let's do check-ins every quarter. Let's track the transits and how they're interacting with your chart and see what they're calling up, what they're activating, so that you can be aware, that you're going to be focusing on this particular thing, whether it's work or your home or your diet or your partner or your kids, things like that. We can get kind of specific about that. I think really the practical implementation is kind of where I pass it on to you or somebody that stays with folks, more long term, which is very exciting to me because often I feel like I give birth to this thing and give it to these people and then I'm like, well, I want to see it get used. I want to see it. Yeah. And that feels nice to me to know that you then take it and care for it and help dive even deeper into each of these things that I only cover in maybe a 2-hour session.
Yeah, because I think what's so beautiful about you, and not that this isn't happening with others too, but you have such a sanctity and sacredness for the work and the research and just the practice, and the study. And so you are birthing, right? Every time, and it's this beautiful creation, and it's meant to be utilized. And so if I can expand on it, I think you described kind of your own bridge this year for you really being creativity and productivity. The last time we spoke on the phone, and then this session bloomed right now. But the last time we spoke on the phone, it was, you did actually then kind of take those two broad categories and you were whittling them down, right? And it doesn't mean it's not changing, but that you're going, okay, for me, this is looking like X, Y, and Z in these particular categories. So if anybody's ever done the wheel of life with me, and of course Laura has a version of that too in the birth chart, it's kind of like, your finances, your health, your hobbies, your spirituality, just all these different little aspects that then you can whittle it down. And so what I find for my own self in doing readings with you, and then also for having clients where we get to really bloom it out together, we take these bigger buckets and then we get to, first of all, not just whittle them down into kind of like stale goals. Like anybody can do that, right? But we really dive into like, okay, you've got a lot of options here. Like you just described, you know, it may look like, you know, going off into, let's say if it's a relationship thing, it may be girlfriends, it may be with your partner, it may be speaking in your business, you know, like it can kind of look in different areas. And so you whittle down as much as possible, right, in that time frame. And then we keep whittling down, like what is really calling to your soul, that feels really juicy to you to spend committed time in. And then we create, you know, one of the things that I never anticipated doing, but that I do with my clients is I gather all these questions and this talking, and then they get real quiet for a minute, and this beautiful kind of mantra, positive affirmation, goal statement comes out of that. And then, you know, then we start going into the, in my opinion, boring old action steps of like, okay, I'm going to produce a blog every 2 weeks or something, right? And then really get into the accountability of that. And then from there, the bridge, not just of setting the goals and setting the intentions, but research shows, you know, we all think that we're just supposed to magically create these new habits. It takes 90 days, and that's just an average and really not 100% accurate. And so it's not fair to then, you know, I've experienced this a lot. You'll do a session with somebody and they're like, woo, I'm riding high. Yeah, you're going to ride high for an expected amount of time. Everybody has their own neurologic pathway, and then you crash again. My own time frame that I know is if I do a single session of it, you know, if I'm working with somebody, I do a single session, within a month, I've bottomed out again. And so then I think comes the juicy being in community. Like Laura, you shared, you know, you have your sacred circle, right? That is really holding up the mirror for you to go like, no, you can do this. This is available for you, and you're not crazy, right? And just stay the course, you know, and really diving into the juice of that. So Jen, I hope that answers. Can Laura please remind us of what kind of readings she offers? It's a great one.
Absolutely. Yes. So I specialize in the natal chart analysis, and the natal chart is another word for the birth chart, which we calculate with your birth date, birth time, and location. And it is pretty much, the way I describe it, is like an individualized research project on you, where, man, we go all over the world, all over time eras, all over history, all over all sorts of fun ways of looking at stories that you are living within, that are embedded in your psyche, like mythology and tons of mythology. I'm pretty heavy into that stuff, in that we can use the birth chart as a lot of things, but we start by looking at the life, the current life. Often the past life comes in, and past life meaning like childhood and early experience, or something that has happened in the past. But also, I do have a more of a psycho-spiritual approach of this possibility that this is not our first life. This is not our first incarnation, and perhaps we are carrying unconscious memories that are influencing us, or that are influencing the way we show up in the world, the people we interact with, the relationships we have, and the way that we perceive ourselves. And those can be found in the birth chart too. So it could be, or you can look at it as an ancestral inheritance thing too, where we look at what are we carrying when we come into this life? What can we make conscious that's unconscious that we're not seeing because it's in a blind spot that can explain so much? And then how can we use that to break cycles and to move forward and to kind of evolve in that way? So, I mean, you would call that the natal chart analysis. That's generally what I offer. It's about 2 hours. I do them via Zoom. And once you've done that, and if you like that, then we can follow up with readings about your transits. And that means how are the current energies, the current placements of things interacting with your individual birth chart? And what is that activating in your life currently? Or we could look at the year ahead or the next 3 months. You know, we can break it into different increments. So those are the two main options. No, that's actually, there's a third one where I can do a relationship chart. So you and another person, we can look at the origin of that relationship, that specific dynamic that's unique to you both, and interpret it much the same way I do the individual chart. So that's really fun too. Hope that answers the question.
And then I realized I missed one earlier. Jenny asked, will you have a link for the replay? I'd like to share this with a friend. And I can't promise that. I think this should stay up in the Wild and Bright Sanctuary. So hopefully it will, fingers crossed, but I've not recorded it. So this is, we're live and maybe a replay, maybe not. I hope so. So that answers that one. I don't see any other questions. You can pop them in there if you think about it. The last question, Laura, that I have for you is, as our personal astrologist, what do you hope for us in 2021?
I hope for deeper self-knowledge and deeper self-acceptance, and with that, a deeper love of your unique potential, and the fact that we are all part of an ensouled cosmos, right? You're not here by accident, and you're exactly who you are supposed to be. And within that, there's so much potential, there's so much hope, there's so much room to grow and to be excited about your life, right? Even if it isn't where you might want it to be right now, or maybe if there are things you still want to happen or to achieve. I hope you feel seen. I hope there is someone in your life that sees you and appreciates you for who you are. I think that's one of the biggest gifts, to be seen.
Yes, it is. Oh, wow. Pardon me for looking down, just to make sure. Contact information. Yes, we will. I'll get Laura probably, well, let's see. I don't know if I can put Skylore in here. Let's see if I can. But Laura, what you can do after is just, you know, because you're part of our Wild and Bright Sanctuary too, just hop in and put your information in there. Yeah, so we will definitely get that. Thank you for that question. And just say, like, spell out the website real quick, just so.
Yeah, it's Skylore Astrology, Skylore astrology.com. And you can contact me through there, but I'm also on Instagram at Skylore_astrology. So you can read all my posts that way if that's easier, or whatever your preference is. And I also want to say happy full moon, everyone. There's a full moon tonight. And it happens to be in Leo and Aquarius and all the signs I was sort of referring to before. So go out and look at it. And what does that mean? Mm-hmm. I was telling Sara before we hopped on here, this is a really good opportunity to speak with your inner child and to access the creative desires of your heart. What makes you feel like you're having fun, like you're expressing yourself, like you are the center on center stage? What in the life, if anything, makes you feel that way? Follow that. And even though it may bring up experiences of judgment around that, and fears of not fitting in, or feelings of fears of rejection and all sorts of fun stuff like that. That is, to me, the themes that are baked into this full moon. So it's really asking us to try to find a way to express ourselves authentically, as if we were a child with unlimited potential. You know, before some sort of force of the universe or society told us that we shouldn't do that, or that was kind of weird and nobody's going to like it if you do that, right? We want to be revisiting those stories that we tell ourselves and seeing what there may be that comes up from that and how that might be having an effect on us even as adults to this day.
I shared with Laura. I'm so glad you brought that up because I forgot to mention that, and I was sharing a story with you about my own self that before we hopped on the live. Oh my gosh, we could just keep talking forever as we always do.
This is great. Thank you
so much for taking your time. Thank you all, everyone, for being here. We've had a really, really great audience, and there's still 12 of you here, which is unheard of. And I'm just trying to make, we have an inner child essential oil. Cool, amazing. Didn't even know that existed. Oh, Wendy Walker put your website on there. Thank you, Wendy. I love our tribe. I love you guys so much. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Jen saying talk to little Jen. Yeah, talk about little people all the time. I really do. There's a lot of intuitive stuff that comes in. You can, for anybody that's here tonight, just know that even if you've worked with me before, you can hop on and get a $97 Discover Your Joy session, and definitely reach out to Laura. She has just been fantastic, and I have never reached out to her in a transit period whatsoever. I don't think I've ever done that. Just kidding.
I was like, wait, what? Yes, yeah, it's good stuff.
I definitely have. That is always, again, just for me, the word is validating. You know, I love that you're very respectful of not telling people what to do or trying to predict or any of that, but it's this beautiful, resounding validation of, okay, I can just rest kind of with the craziness right now, or whatever it is that I'm grappling with, because it's meant to be there, and then you can do the real work, right?
Exactly.
So we're both here for you. Hopefully this will be up later. Thank you all so much for being here, and we're giving everybody big hugs since we can, because we're online. Okay, I don't even know how to turn any of this off. This is, Laura's like, you're doing such a great job.
You are doing a great job.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night.